afternoon, everyone. We're moving very quickly, and we don't have much time, so we will continue. It is my pleasure to introduce a panel of excellent thinkers, theologians, and activists. If you could come in and please take your seat as quickly as possible, we'll begin. It's my pleasure first to introduce the newly elected bishop of the Orthodox Church in Qatar and the president of the Christian Steering Committee of Qatar. Archbishop Makarios has been active in DICID and all local interfaith activities in the region. He is finishing his PhD thesis on the modern church history of Jerusalem, and while he was born in Greece, he grew up in Jerusalem, and he considers that really very much his home. It is my pleasure to introduce Archbishop Makarios. Please continue.
Yes, thank you, Rabbi Professor Robert Milton, for the introduction. And I am deeply honored to have lived in Doha for the last decade as a priest and now as a bishop of the Greek Orthodox Church, and to have been participating from the 3rd until the 11th Doha Interfaith Conference. Thanks to the initiative of the Emir Father Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al-Thani for starting the Doha Interfaith Dialogue Conference, at the present, His Highness Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al-Thani, who continues with the same generosity hosting this conference. During this period, many of us Christians, Muslims, and Jews attend this same conference, seeking to contribute to greater interfaith understanding in our tormented world. This year, I am very thankful to have been invited by the chairman of the DICID, Professor Ibrahim Saleh Al-Naimi, to address the overall theme, role of youth in enhancing the value of dialogue. In particular, religious perspective on youth from the Christian point of view. A dialogue in the terminology of the word means relationship through the word and has to be involving two parts. From a Christian perspective, there is continuous dialogue between God and man through the sent prophets, the written word, which are the scriptures, and in person through Jesus Christ, the incarnate Word of God. In this dialogue, there is involved the humankind and in all stages of his life. According to the theme of our conference, we will concentrate on the youth from a Christian perspective. There are, in my opinion, three categories of dialogue: the dialogue of the word, the dialogue of the silence, and the dialogue of acts. The first category is the most known and exercised by everybody, the public's way of expression in conferences, books, and media. Although we speak about dialogue, there is the paradox of silence, which we can reach in a mystical way through communication with God by prayer. One of the non-Orthodox assets of the last century would advise parents that if their children did not want to have a dialogue with them, for themselves to pray to God about them, and that God will then guide them instead. The third category is the dialogue of acts, which is the performance of words in works. There are many ways to put the theory into action, and one example is the permission that had been granted from the government of Qatar to Christian expatriates to build their own worship center in Doha. In the premises of this complex, Christian youth have the opportunity to construct and live their religion and spirituality. At the same time, Muslims build their own worship centers all over the Christian world. The youth are more spontaneous and have different kind of interests compared to that which happens with the older generations. We can have with the youth a more sincere dialogue that will build bridges in the future stages of the man's life. The youth are considered by older generations as being inexperienced and inconsiderate, but the Apostle Paul encouraged the youth, giving them opportunity in his epistle to Timothy. Let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of the believers in word, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, in purity. 1 Timothy 4:12. The example of a faithful youth, according to the gospel, is the one who fulfills the values of dialogue, charity, spiritual life, and purity. Unfortunately, in the secularized world that we live in today, the religious values are marginalized in the social life, and the fundamental spiritual and ethical values of the gospel are struck out of this life by promoting the model of a modern life. The Christian faith's dialogical type corresponds in the mystery of incarnation. God himself, through Jesus Christ, descended to the world to reveal to humankind that he is with men and always working and partaking in their lives. While offering himself to man and communicating with him, he offers man space and time to live, to think, to take action, and to decide. Through the gospel, man in all stages of his life is called to have dialogue with absolute respect and discernment towards the other. This dialectic meeting which man has with one another shows their similarities or differences, expressing as well the solidarity between all the people as being created by God and brothers between themselves. Christian theology is recognizing the freedom of the human person, which is given by God, and at the same time, the responsibility of his free choices in this life. By nature, the youth does not have the experience of a ripe age. There is the duty of the church to promote the above-mentioned spiritual values and all the other Christian values into today's society. Unfortunately, religious values are in a direct opposition to the values of modern day and promoted perception of the materialized world. There are the difficulties of the engagement between youth and religion. As well, the role of religion in shaping people's sense of self-belonging and spiritual progress is the example of Jesus Christ promoting the simplicity of children in his relationship with men as a condition to inherit the kingdom of heaven, a means to paradise. And Jesus called a little child into him and sent him in the midst of them and said, "Verily I say to you, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter to the kingdom of heaven." Matthew 18:2-3. For further explanation of the verses, I use the interpretation of Apostle Paul. "Brother, do not be children in your thinking, yet in evil be infants, but in your thinking be men." 1 Corinthians 14:20. In this context, the word man means perfect or of a ripe age. We are called by Jesus Christ to be children not in mind, but in our way of accepting the other person. The innocence and the humbleness of children is used to explain how we should be in our faith and our dialogue with one another. The general ignorance of religious values today is the big obstacle in shaping young people's sense of belonging and in making the correct choices in their lives. I have had the opportunity to be an educator for a period of my life, while during my service as a priest, parish priest, and now as a bishop to teach youth about Christianity. It is my impression and experience that the questions and opinions of the pupils, which they ask and share with their teachers on different themes and problems, fill me with hope. They used to remind me of my generation, but with different challenges, but with the same hope, faith, and vitality. The youth of all generations and of today they are educated in spiritual values and exercise their faith in their lives through an open and sincere dialogue with their family. Their religion will cause them to become a positive and useful member of the society. For young adults, spirituality means to be a spiritual relationship with God through prayer, reading the Bible, and other religious literature, as well as to have a place to grow spiritually and socially, are the experiences of young pilgrims to the Holy Land on the other Christian sites in the world, where young people come into touch with faith and meet spiritual leaders with an authentic experience in their relation with God. It is obvious that the youth are asking for a true and sincere relationship through their religion. Furthermore, through the positive influence of religion of young people, they live with the feelings of belonging, community, and spiritual experience. In worldly culture, the youth search for authenticity and want to see morality located within social influences and norms, rather than imposed by a religion. The technology of today brings people closer from different languages, countries, religions. This fact, while doubting, he has a useful consequences in the distribution of knowledge and information. But at the same time, there are applications that deliver information and images which are direct imposition of certain cultural patterns, which are not in harmony with the specific tradition of the people. Without knowledge of the dangers, the use of technology by the youth has not always been perceived, and consequence comes out. Often, society has marginalized religion, yet it has been publicized to a diverse range of audience, communicating the importance of religion in social life and highlighting the sociological work that is being conducted in this field. This shows the many ways that confuse the young and they struggle to find a meaningful place in the world. You young people are waiting longer to marry, to have children, and to choose a career direction. As a result, they enjoy more freedom, opportunities, and personal growth than ever before. But what their society fails to provide are the resources of meaning needed for them in their journey to adulthood. In this way, The transition to adulthood is also more complex, disjointed, and confusing than before. I am shortly to investigate the difficulties young people face today, because of those difficulties and the consequences both for individuals and for world society as a whole. Rampant consumer capitalism, ongoing failures in education, hyper-individualism, postmodernist moral relativism, and other aspects of modern society's culture are all contributing to the chaotic terrain that the young must cross. In this chaotic terrain is the driving force of modern society's culture, opposite to the religious perspective of values as it is described above. The youth in our times are called to oppose the values of the secularized world by choosing a way of life that proposed this dialogue of spiritual values, because these values do not exist in such society. The youth today face many challenges by having grown up and even having been born into the pluralistic environment with many religious and a fast-growing, technologically evolutionary society. They have to confront a materialistic society beware of an anti-religion legacy, in anticipation of the religious legacy promoting the values of their legacy, in a fast-changing world there, where the only stable thing are their values. On this point, it is important to instill these values in the young and a rudder of guidance in order to confront the challenges of the modern world. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Archbishop Makarios. I understand from your words that youth fill you with hope in their search for an authentic spiritual relationship with God and humanity, but they are struggling.
Yes.
They're struggling in an increasingly complex and increasingly difficult world. Thank you very much. I must say that I had neglected to introduce myself. I was told to introduce myself. My name is Reuven Firestone, Rabbi Reuven Firestone. I teach at Hebrew Union College in Los Angeles and the University of Southern California, and it is my pleasure to be a part of the conference today and to be active in DICID. Our next speaker is Dr. Muhammad Mansoor Alam from India, chairman of the Institute of Objective Studies in Delhi. It's a think tank that is involved in organizing interreligious dialogue and has spun off a number of institutions engaging in improving society in the Indian subcontinent. He has a PhD in economics and has been an advisor to a number of Indian governments. Dr. Alam, Mansoor Alam.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nasalli ala rasulihil kareem. My dear brother, Rabbi Professor Robert Milton Firestone, this fire and stone will be becoming in energy to us, inshallah, as you carry the name. And friends, brothers and sisters, I'm going to present my paper, Role of Youth in Enhancing the Value of Dialogue and Indian Perspective. Before I present my paper to you, let me say one statement I would like to give at this juncture related to the whole issue on which we are sitting over there. A vision without a task is a drudgery. I'm repeating, a vision without a task is a drudgery. A task without a vision is a dream. A task with a vision is a hope, but hope of the world. I'm going to present about this vision and task about the issue, but it will be within the context of India. Brothers and sisters, we have first to know what dialogue is not before coming down to what dialogue is. And from here we have to proceed to placing it in its historical perspective and see how in today's context the youth can have a role of enhancing its value. So first, what dialogue is not? Dialogue is not about establishing a we versus they equation and creating a hegemony for our own ideas vis-a-vis their ideas. It is not about creating a hierarchy of ideas. It is also not about an exchange of blames, nor for trading of charges. Additionally, dialogue is not about agreement or disagreement. Now, what dialogue is? It is a healing process, a warm human gesture, an open-ended exchange of ideas without forcing anyone to take a certain position or insisting on anyone to take a stand. Because he has given me only 10 minutes, so I'm skipping one page just to maintain the presidential order secretly. I will give you some brief idea about the Institute of Objective Studies and its role, so that finally we will be reaching to the final points. Over the years, Institute of Objective Studies, headquartered in New Delhi, has contributed in this process with its own international seminars and symposia on interfaith, intercivilizational dialogue. In the meanwhile, we have had similar conferences on inter-community linkages within India, because we are having every religion over there and communities over there. Communities here meaning faith and ethnic communities. Beside these, we have held international conferences on the issues of youth within and outside India. In India, the population of persons between 15 and 19 years is around 250 million. If we include persons up to 25 years, the number crosses 300 million. You can imagine the scale and potential of our young population. With so much energy and enthusiasm available, the country is set to harvest a great demographic dividends. In the case of India, like China, a huge population base is an asset, not a liability, as the Malthusian economist of the 50s or 60s feared. India has an edge in one sense over the China. Its population has grown at more than double the rate of China over the last 3 decades, as China has observed one-child norms over the decade. The result is that China does not have enough youth compared to the aging population which the younger generation has to support. The fear of the youth bulge, which according to demographers and other experts lead to war, mass violence, political upheaval, and civil unrest, have not come true in India. The Muslim world as a whole has remained peaceful except for external aggression and civil strife in a few countries, despite the fact that a large proportion of Muslim world is youthful, with a population of 780 million persons below 25 years of age. The youth are not liabilities if we do not waste them to keep them unhealthy, uneducated, and untrained. I would leave the youth thread here to be picked up soon. Meanwhile, I would digress a little to talk for a couple of minutes about some of our past programs on intercivilizational and allied issues over the year, attended by ministers, judges, and intellectuals from India and abroad. Our track record says, in October 2008, we organized an international conference on towards human understanding through dialogue in New Delhi, with an impressive representation of religious leaders of Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, or Jainism from India and several other countries. In 2009, the IUS organized a remarkable lecture by one of the foremost authorities of the subject from the Leicester, UK-based Dr. Ataullah Siddiqui. A major national seminar was held by the IOS on fostering inter-community linkages in India in 2003. One of our most widely covered conferences was Intercivilizational Dialogue in a Globalizing World in 2005 that was attended by India's Prime Minister and half a dozen of his cabinet colleagues, judges, intellectuals, academics, and foreign dignitaries like Datu Sri Anwar Ibrahim, former Deputy Prime Minister of Malaysia. With a rich and diverse background like this Institute of Objective Studies, whose chairman I happen to be, should be able to contribute to the present discourse. We have produced 350 books on the different aspects, including about 12 books on this issue. Back to youth. This is our main issue. To pick up the thread of youth and its role in enhancing the values of interfaith dialogue that we had left a moment ago, let us begin with the assertions that today's youth are the leaders of tomorrow. Full of buoyant energy, hope, and enthusiasm, the youth also have time on their side. On the other hand, the older generation has experience and wisdom to share with them. This is a nice combination, nice and fructious, as today's youth are going to be the leaders of tomorrow, whether we like it or not. But it is sure, it is important for Muslim youth to join the interfaith dialogue on the way to maturing into future leaders. It is important for our youth to remember that the current phase of the dialogue was initiated in the wake of extraordinary Islam baiting. Every day, the Western media was full of anti-Islam messages. It was quite evident that all this was not a spontaneous phenomenon, but some hostile groups were deliberately forcing on an Islam versus West confrontation through heavily drumming up Islamophobia. Our youth must realize that as the responsibility of practicing Islam, it is also their responsibility to establish peaceful relations with other faith groups on the basis of mutual understanding through dialogue and cooperation for common goods, protecting the fair name of Islam is as incumbent on the youth as on the elder generation. So far, the need for the dialogue has formally been established. The interfaith dialogue, intensified dialogue since 2008 has certainly reduced the Islamic baiting level in Western media, even as the Western confrontation with some Muslim nations is yet to cease completely. Our youth have to remember that the Quran clearly describes the single human family of classes, creeds, colors, and caste as the children of a single pair of primordial parents. This being the case, it requires that, as followed by Islam, we try to establish dialogue across races and religion in the family of Adam and Eve, peace be upon them. The first tangible result is a visible decline in the level of Islamophobia. We must insist on such result as a proof of sincerity and success of such dialogue. As religion, we have family values and the morally or ordered world as commonly shared goals. We thus can come together on preventing the ruin of the institution of family because of live-in relationship, lesbianism, gay movement, bisexualism, and tribalism. Yes, okay. Some human demography, democratically, yes, you have 2 minutes. Okay, I'm only on page now. Approved and non-violent way of forestalling this trend has to be found out by leaders of major faith and the practical example of our youth. The road ahead, this is important for the youth. The youth, including the Muslim youth, are uniquely positioned in life to be able to influence the course of events and shape the very spirit of the age. Being a largest component of the workforce, the youth have the greatest opportunity to mix with and interact with each other across faiths, nationalities, and races. The same holds good for colleges and the university, bureaucrats, and the armed forces across the world. In these areas of life, religious and sectarians, differences are muted and de-emphasized as fellow feeling is high. In those circles of many youthful people, the idea of interfaith understanding will readily take roots if we work towards it with sincerity and dedication. I'm leaving some portion, coming to the conclusion. In essence, the forces of globalization today and the forces of history always generate certain negative features like racial and nationalist ideas of supremacy, brutal power play, economic and social inequality, injustice and loss of human dignity. The focus of all future dialogue should be the elimination of the above features from our social and political lives. Dialogue is about the establishment of justice, equality, liberty, and the dignity, human dignity. This is what the Islamic spirit calls for, and other major religions would certainly agree upon. Sometimes it is a racial supremacist hubris disguised as religion that creates an unjust order. If we believe that certain people are born to rule and others to be ruled, we can never hope to achieve an equal, just, and fair order. If we allow racial supremacist ideas to rule the world, we will never have an equal world. The youth have to imbibe these values. Lastly, an important goal of such dialogue is the creation of humane world. If justice is denied to oppressed people, we will never attain peace. Peace will be elude us as long as the gap between the rich and poor keeps widening. These issues must never be forgotten in dialogue, as they are the foundation of dignified human life. The youth have to lend support to this vision. Thank you very much for the patience listening.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. I now turn to Rabbi Michel Schlesinger, who represents CONIB, the Brazilian Jewish Confederation, and is a rabbi of the Jewish Congregation of São Paulo. His father was a founder of Interfaith Dialogue in Brazil. His grandfather was a founder of Interfaith Dialogue in Brazil and was an inspiration for him in his own interfaith work himself. Rabbi Schlesinger.
Thank you, Rabbi Firestone. Assalamu alaikum. Sabah el khair. Ismi Michel Schlesinger, ana Brazili. Ana takalama loa Arabia. This is more or less all the Arabic I know, but I would like to improve it each year. I'd like to thank Professor Al-Naimi for the invitation. I'd like to thank my friend Claudio Eppelman for recommending my name to this conference. 2013 was a year marked by manifestations in the streets of Brazil. The most important of these protests occurred in June and was motivated by the attempt of the government to increase in 10 cents of a dollar a bus tariff. There are two common denominators in the different demonstrations that occurred throughout the year. The first element was the strong presence of youth in the organization and the holding of the street parades. The second element was the use of social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, among others, for the calling of youth and the transmission in real time of the evolution of the protests. I believe that this phenomenon brings two important elements for the challenge of engaging of youth in interfaith dialogue. The first conclusion is that the youth are seeking causes capable of mobilizing them. The contemporary world seems to lack causes that may induce the mobilization of the youth. In a recent past in Brazil, the resistance to the military government was a reason for the union of the youth. In the 21st century, the lack of political engagement seems to have cooled the combative spirit of the youth. The desire for change, the dissatisfaction with the status quo, and the desire of a vanguard behavior seem to have been substituted by a self-indulgence without cause. The second important evidence is that any cause that wishes to be close to the hearts and minds of the youth must go through an adaptation of language. The use of the social media as a channel for the mobilization of the youth looks as an indispensable process. Also last year, during Pope Francis' visit to Brazil for the World Youth Day, the Church seems to have done its homework. The large crowds of youth mobilized to participate in the different events in the city of Rio de Janeiro were propelled by an excellent work of social media that started to be developed many months before the effective arrival of the Pope to the Brazilian soil. Promoters of the Interfaith Dialogue that are attuned with the two premises stressed above will have more possibilities of engaging the youth in this sacred cause. Due to its universal nature, the Interfaith Dialogue has the potential to reach the youth, whether more or less religious, to engage them around this movement. When we speak of dialogue, we speak of the union of people of different religions for the facing of common challenges for the preservation of environment, the decrease of social differences, better public safety, quality of teaching, universal medical assistance, among others. If we will have the capacity of working with the social media to reach the youth and make the interfaith cause more known, I believe we may be surprised with the positive response that the youth will be capable of giving. There are few instructions about how the architecture of a synagogue should be. For this reason, it is possible to find synagogues around the world with very creative and varied architecture. However, a construction rule calls our attention. A synagogue must mandatorily have windows. We may therefore understand that the religion must be connected with reality. The religious challenge in the Jewish perspective is not to isolate itself from the society, but rather to participate in a more active manner and to make a difference. In the past, some rabbis had an important role in the fight for human rights. It was so when Rabbi Abraham Yoshua Heschel marched at Martin Luther King Jr.'s side for the rights of African Americans in the United States. In a famous interview after the march, the rabbi declared that he felt that he had prayed with his legs. Likewise, in Argentina, Rabbi Marshall Mayer participated in innumerable manifestations against the repression of the military government at that time. In Brazil, Rabbi Henry Sobel participated in an active and courageous manner in the process of re-democratization of the country by the side of other religious leaders, as the Archbishop Dom Paulo Evaristo Arns and the Reverend James Wright. In a passage of the Talmud, we are invited to build a society in which the blindness of individualism is substituted by universal engagement. It is thus written, "You will grope at noontime as a blind person gropes in the darkness." Deuteronomy 28:29. Regarding this verse, Rabbi Yossi in the Talmud states that he was always puzzled by this passage. Quote, "What difference does it make to a blind person whether it be day or night? He cannot see in either case. Until it happened that I was walking in the dark of night, and I came across a blind person holding a torch. I said to him, 'My son, why are you carrying a torch?' Said the blind man to me, 'As long as I carry the torch, people can see me coming and come to my aid so that I do not trip and fall. That we, leaders of different religions, should also be capable for strengthening a society of dialogue and meeting. If we are capable of communicating our cause with precision and make appropriate use of technological tools, we may be positively surprised by the subduing of blindness and the engagement of youth in interfaith dialogue. Shukran. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Schlesinger. It's now my pleasure to introduce Sir Iqbal Sakrani. He was the founding Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain, a national umbrella and representative body of British Muslims. He has served on the advisory council of the previous 4 Home Secretaries of the UK government, advising them on matters relating to equality and race relations, a man who has been engaged for over 4 decades in various voluntary activities in the UK, an important one of them being interreligious dialogue. Sir Iqbal Sakran.
Thank you. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, most kind, most merciful. Mr. Chairman, distinguished guests, friends, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi, and good afternoon to you all. It is indeed pleasure being at the 11th Doha Interfaith Conference, and I'm particularly pleased because the theme of this year's conference relates to youth. This was an issue that was discussed last year, and I'm pleased that the organizers have taken this important issue on board. May I also take the opportunity to thank Dr. Naimi and Dr. Professor Isa Manai for giving us the opportunity to be present and participate in this very important subject matter of youth participation. Various speakers have spoken eloquently on the need for youth to be involved in interfaith activities. Those present in this gathering, many of them perhaps have had some chance in their early life to be involved in some sort of dialogue with other people of other faith. And the other young people who have joined in the hope to understand why the subject of dialogue is emphasized and its importance in today's times. Experience in youth has huge impact in our adult life. Youth are a major force in the contemporary world. Today's youth make new intellectual contributions and excel in mobilizing social networks and corporations. A new breed of young adults insist on engaging, seeking information and clarification rather than accepting what they are being told as truth. No longer are they passive spectators, they are innovators and adhere to more cultural and tradition practices. Today's youth need and deserve appreciation for their positive engagement to help release the unprecedented social growth, creativity, and leadership that includes everyone and excludes nobody. Religion and spirituality at their best can inspire high standards of excellence. It is time to help youth hold on to their idealism, the best of spiritual wisdom, communication tools, and planning skills, and give them the voice and opportunity to build the preferred world of peace and social justice for the benefit of all, neighbors forever and away from ghettoism and isolation. Today's various international forums and conferences and initiatives are taking place, which provides platform for networking, tools for dialogue, and national advocacy. These initiatives enable our youth to play an active role in the society, whether it is via politics, civil society, or educational institutions. What is important is to focus more on youth participation in both intra- and interfaith dialogue. The crises that we have been referred earlier on in the speeches, today we witness are both in terms of interfaith issues as well as interfaith in terms of other faiths as well. In each of the forums or the conferences, we need role players from all sections of society that provide confidence and experiences of working for the common good. There are numerous examples of positive work and initiatives which needs to be showcased. Today, some great work was recognized, and I'm pleased that the work of the Three Faith Forum in the UK, which has been playing a role for the last few decades. And I remember as a youngster, as a young person, involved with that forum, with our elders like Sir Sigmund Sternberg, late Dr. Zaki Badawi, and many others. That gave me an opportunity to understand where does interfaith lead. It is that process of engagement within the faith communities that enable us to bring about major changes for the benefit of the society. On issues of equality, issues of discrimination, we were stronger when we were working together as people of faith and no faith. We were able to convince the government of the day the need to recognize that people should not be judged on the basis of the color of their skin or the religion they come from, but the role they can play in the society for the betterment of everyone. This is the inspiration that our youngsters, our youth need to see the positive change that can bring about. Today's challenges are different. We see much more conflicts which are related to the socio-economic crisis. But then the solutions are there as well, from the faith angle. Today the governments are looking at various other models of financing, where young youth professionals are now taking courses, whether it's Islamic Sharia compliant finance, ethical finance, whatever you may call. For the first time in the UK, we had this major conference of the World Islamic Economic Forum that brought in 18 leaders from different parts of the world, Muslim and non-Muslim, to see how trade and finance can enable us to engage better and understand better. That attracted the young professionals from different fields, legal profession, accountancy, financials, bankers, all got together. During that course of engagement of understanding the whole issue of finance and economics, they had the opportunity to understand and engage with others in terms of people of other faith. An opportunity they would not have had we not, the organizers at that time, ensured that people of all other faith communities were also invited at these events. I could go on giving many examples of what has been done in the Western countries, whether it's chaplaincies, where we have got spirituality now being addressed in hospitals, prisons, armed services, in the police force, whether we have places of prayer, multi-faith rooms, again in hospitals, at airports, government departments. All these activities are a means of understanding the other side better. Today, we are fortunate enough that the governments in many countries, being secular countries, realize the importance of religion. They don't want to talk God, they want to keep that aside, but they cannot keep it aside completely, knowing the benefits of providing those facilities of spirituality to their workers would in turn be of benefit to them as well. In conclusion, let me say that we should not forget that diversity is one of the characteristics of this creation. It is appropriate to accept the difference of mankind and not to open the door to any form of discrimination, whether it is based on race or religion. Culture of dialogue, particularly amongst youth, needs to be advocated at every opportunity. If people of faith shy away from this important aspect of engagement, then what hope is there for people from the secular groups or people of no faith groups to take this matter forward? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sir Iqbal. We have, I believe, a little bit of time for questions, so I will take 3 questions. If people have questions, we are not open for lectures or long comments, but if we have questions addressed to any of the presenters, I'm going to be counting down in a second. Yes, number 1. Any other? Number 2? Any other questioners? Okay, yes, number 2. We'll have 2 questions then. Thank you. Yes, please. Do we have a microphone? Yes.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. خالد عبد اللطيف، مستشار مركز التعاون الأوروبي العربي بألمانيا الاتحادية ورئيس تحرير جريدة الأمة العربية. بداية، كل حديث في كثير من الأوقات يمضي مرسلا نظريا مجردا بعيدا عن واقع الناس، مقطوع الصلة بهمومهم وبأملهم في مستقبلهم، هو كلام لا رصيد له. وأشيد بهذا المؤتمر المتميز الذي تستضيفه دولة قطر، ولا شك أن الأديان السماوية أنزلها الله تعالى لسعادة البشر ولهدايتهم إلى الصراط المستقيم ولغرس المعاني الفاضلة في نفوسهم، وأن الكتب التي أنزلها سبحانه وتعالى على أنبيائه قد قررت هذه الحقيقة. من ذلك قول الله تعالى: الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم نزل عليك الكتاب بالحق مصدقا لما بين يديه وأنزل التوراة والإنجيل من قبل هدى للناس وأنزل الفرقان، كتاب أنزلناه إليك لتخرج الناس من الظلمات إلى النور بإذن ربهم إلى صراط العزيز الحميد. وأنا استمعت إلى معظم المحاضرين في هذا اللقاء الطيب المتميز، وأشيد بهذا الجهد الطيب، وأرى الاستفادة والاستزادة أيضا في عدد من المحاور، خاصة أنه يركز على الشباب، والشباب هم ركيزة التنمية وهم أمل المستقبل، فأشيد بهذا الجهد وأشكركم.
هذا شو؟ Okay. So, yes, please. Yes. Yes.
أنا الدكتور حنا عيسى، أمين عام الهيئة الإسلامية المسيحية لنصرة القدس والمقدسات، باسم أهل القدس، باسم القدس الحزين. هذا مهبط الديانات السماوية الثلاث، اليهودية، المسيحية والإسلام. نحيي جميع المجتمعين. نحن كفلسطينيين صراعنا ليس مع اليهودية إطلاقا، هو صراعنا مع الاحتلال. يزول الاحتلال تزول المسببات، وبالتالي نعيش بوئام. لكن سؤالي هو كالتالي: أنظر بأن العامل السياسي هو الذي يقرب الحوار من عدمه. إذا كانت هناك أوضاع سياسية سليمة على المجتمع الدولي نرى بأن الحوار يكون تلقائيا سهل والمحبة تغمس النفوس. أما إذا كان هناك خلافات سياسية فلا نرى أي وجود للحوار. إذن كيف ينظر الحاخام من البرازيل إلى هذا الموضوع من ناحية فلسفية منطقية استيمولوجية كنظرية المعرفة؟ وبالتالي ما هي الأسس التي يمكن أن نعتمد عليها في حوارنا بين الديانات اليهودية والمسيحية والإسلام؟ بالإضافة كيف ننظر إلى من لا لهم ديانات، لهم ديانات بالمفهوم كالهندوس البوذيين إلى آخره، لكن كيف نتعامل معهم كذلك؟ لأن الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم قال بالنسبة لنا هذا شرك، لكن بالنسبة لهم دين. وبالتالي علينا كيف نتعامل مع هذا المجتمع المتنوع المتجدد المتنور، العولمة التي دخلت وقضت على ريعان الشباب بمفهومها الطموح الديني إلى المستقبل، بل أصبحت التكنولوجيا تستعمل لعبارات ولأشياء غريبة عن مجتمعاتنا وعن دياناتنا. وشكرا لكم.
Thank you very much. Rabbi Schlesinger, do you want to respond to the question? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. We have one more question. Did I miss that? Yes. Okay, please. And then we'll respond to the questions. Yes. This is the third.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm from Pakistan and I'm a student. I just want to ask a question that in all these conferences that are based on the Interfaith Dialogue, we most of the times miss out on the political involvement of the students or the youth in bringing about the change. So my question is that how come is it possible to bring about an effective change in the overall system of the country or of the communities if the students or the youth is not involved in the political associations? How come that is possible on the private level? I mean, is it actually effective, more than effective or not, to bring about positive interfaith dialogue within the communities or among the communities if there is not political involvement of the students or the youth?
Thank you for all your comments and questions. I will take the chair's prerogative to interject one before we begin. First of all, they're very good questions. Your last question was actually a nice statement, really, which is how can it be possible without youth involvement? And I simply want to kind of clarify that and hope that we can elicit a comment from the expert panels here in response to your assessment, which I think is perfectly fine. And not to neglect the question from the gentleman from Jerusalem. So shall we move? If we have comments, we'll just start on one side and move to the other. And if we don't have a comment, it's fine. We don't have to answer.
In terms of involving young persons, whether it's in politics, in socioeconomic activities, or interfaith activities, it is essential that there must be a forum, a mechanism in place. There are various organizations now being established, youth organizations, student organizations, within universities and colleges that provide that platform for them to participate. The political parties are very keen to bring in new members. In fact, the membership role in Europe and other places, the political parties' membership is declining fast. So they would need some youth to come in. But I hope that when we talk about participation in politics, we are talking about people of faith to come in politics as well. So there is a bit of a cleaner politics. There's a greater need of that dirty politics to come out. Politics is essentially their daily lives. We cannot live without it, it's there. But how it's functioning, the level of corruption, the level of scandals, the governance issues, the due diligence matters that come up, these are serious matters. That's why we see concerns in the crisis. How can we bring the change? The change can only be brought in by young youth people who are clear in the hearts of their faith, the responsibility to the Creator, and the betterment for the community at large, rather than for their own good. So that's the way for us to move forward.
I don't want to add much things what Sir Iqbal Sakrani said about the question of the young lady from Pakistan. But always the political parties, they try to attract the youth, but they are not supporting the youth without their own benefit. So we don't have to expect from a political party to inherit the dialogue or the interfaith, interreligious dialogue. But we have to be involved as members, as active members of Christianity, of society, as members of any religion, and to give the witness of our faith. It is in the political parties or in any other manifestation in other part of the society, as it is in the education and in media, in etc. Thank you.
This is a very important question from the youth point of view. Let us see like this. Dialogue must be met into the member of the different faith. This is the one. There is no restriction at all. If youth decide they have to interact with the other members of the other faith, nobody is going to stop them. And if they are having the interaction, naturally they will be having the strength to change the future. If they are having the inhibition because of this faith or that faith, then he or she cannot change the environment. This is the one. Secondly, from Indian point of view, every 18 years old, whether he's a boy or girl, they are supposed to not only to dialogue, also to vote. And recently in Delhi election, it was the youth who has forced the Congress party and other party to go out from the power. And they had given a new dimension, totally new dimension. So it is the youth, if they imbibe with these values, they should not become the corrupt themselves. They should not become as a greedy. They can really change the environment. Environment is in their favor, provided they can decide that they have to take the action, they have to fight with the situation, they have to take the leadership of the future. Nobody is going to stop. Thank you.
Rabbi?
We, as religious leaders, must address the message that religion is not the problem. It's the potential solution. If we recognize one another as sons and daughters of the one God, and teach that message to the youth, then we will be capable to overcome together all the territorial, political, and economical challenges. Inshallah, God willing. Thank you.
I'm going to take the prerogatives of the chair to misuse my position for a moment and respond to the third question that I think we should all agree that it is wrong for government to exclude youth from full engagement in politics, and the governments that exclude youth from engagement in politics are governments that suffer and govern countries that suffer from the problem of non-youth engagement. And I think you know what I'm talking about. So it's absolutely critical that youth be engaged fully, as full as possible, and not excluded. I would like to also respond to the brother from Jerusalem. I heard a very important observation last week from a Pakistani brother in Islamabad who made a very, I think, a brilliant, and these are the kinds of observations that seem brilliant, and then you wonder why nobody has said this before. He said very simply that the job of religion is to serve as a conscience to government. Religion should shape government to ensure that it is ethical. But unfortunately, he observed, the opposite occurs too often in this world, where government is more successful in shaping religion, and that's to the detriment of all of us. That's a terrible development. And I would like to close by urging us as religious people to make sure that that doesn't happen, and where it is happening, to engage to ensure that moral and ethical government prevails. Thank you to all of us on the panel who have engaged and shared your wisdom. We are now going to break for a short period of time and then continue with the breakout sessions. Thank you very much. Please welcome or give a hand of thanks